Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 31st episode of the Grit Talk Show. For those of you who do not know, Grit Coaches is a community of international coaches who are certified, usually ICF. We have EMCC as well. So, if you are a coach, please feel free to join us. DM me, get in touch with our team, and see how we go about with our memberships. We also offer NLP DIS certification. So if you're interested in those, do check out www.gridcoaches.com. And today we have with us another member of Grid Coaches, the lovely Oceane Chamoret, joining us from France. And Oceane is an ICF certified coach as well. She loves to work with young people. She has a background of hotel management, and she is a transformational coach who believes in making young people think differently. Hussein, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about how you work with young people and with different clients. What is your mode of working?
Hi, yeah. First of all, it's great to be here with everybody. Thank you for having me. And thank you for that introduction. And what I have to add to that is that, yes, I'm a transformational coach. My passion is in helping people use the tool of mindfulness to develop and to expand the quality of their life. And more precisely, I work with young adults and using the tool of mindfulness so that they can become positive change makers of the world. My passion and strong belief is that we all have something positive to contribute to the society. And at any given time in history, we always need people to contribute to positive advancement of society, no matter what industry that may be in. And my passion is in helping young people, young adults, develop these change capacities and be fully themselves so they can contribute all the positive things they can contribute to society. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing, Hussein. For today, you've chosen a lovely topic, the power of perspective. It's something that we don't talk about much. And come to think of it, I think a lot of times we keep focusing on things with a tunnel vision, whereas I think asking somebody else might give us more perspective. Is that right? Please tell us more about what is perspective actually in working.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can think of perspective in different ways, actually. We've got perspective where we have different people, different individuals coming together with a different point of view. And that, as we know, contributes to creativity and problem solving and conflict management. But we also have the perspective from an individual standpoint. So we have collective perspective and individual perspective. And to go a bit more to semantics, perspective is by definition a particular way of considering something. So quite simply put, is just this ability to view a particular situation from different angles. And when we don't practice this ability to, this capability for perspective, that is when we end up feeling stuck, and as if things aren't going our way. We feel frustrated, and that is mainly because we're looking at something with a particular angle. So understanding the power of perspective comes from also understanding how our brain treats information. And so in our day-to-day lives, there's what we call the real and what we call our reality. And there's a bit of a difference between the two. In the real, we have all the information that surrounds us in our environment, in the world, everything that is happening at any given moment, things that have happened in the past, that will happen in the future. It's very rich in information. It's infinitely diverse and infinitely complex. And to cope with this complexity, our brain filters down this information so that it doesn't oversaturate our cognitive capacity, and our brain ends up ingesting a particular percentage or portion of the information that is around us at all times. So by default, it means that when we understand something, we'll understand it with this filtered version of what actually exists out there. And when we understand this principle, we understand that when we're feeling stuck or frustrated or something's not going our way, that's because our brain is viewing it in a specific angle, and we actually have the choice to view it in a different way. And not only is it that we have a choice, it's that we should pursue the practice of switching perspectives, because it becomes mental agility. It becomes using perspective as almost a shock absorber for life,
Mm.
whether it's when we're facing new challenges, or whether we're just finding ourselves in a tricky situation, like a conflict with a person,
Mm.
or a pivotal point in our career, all different types of situations through which we might face a challenge. Being able to have the flexible perspective becomes almost necessary to go
Mm.
through the waves of life.
Yes, so Hussein, often, we're like when you, as you said, problem solving, when we're, overcome with some problem, and we're the solution that our mind comes up with is not working, and then somebody else just comes in and tells us this should be for instance, if you're playing chess and
Mhm,
there's a move, and somebody else just comes and does it for you, and you say, oh, I didn't think of it that way.
mhm,
So can we develop at an individual level those tools or those techniques to shift our own perspective and see things from another angle? Because we probably, as due to whatever we've learned and our past experience, we're probably, our mind is working in a particular way and
mhm,
it's coming up with the same solution which is not working.
mhm.
So how do we change our perspective? How do we shift our mind and try to see things from, develop that kind of creativity in us?
Yeah. So a way to address that is to understand the rigidity versus flexibility of our minds when we're confronted with certain information. So
Mm.
because our mind is constantly trying to make sense of things around us, it likes to that filtered activity that it does. It puts things into boxes. And also we have to appreciate that every person, the way they filter the information will be different, because oftentimes it's based on experience, environment, life development, all these different things. So we each have a different way of filtering the information. And so we also have other things that we do with our brain, which is that because we filter this information, we really latch onto it as this main understanding that we have of our environment. And so when we're confronted to another perspective, either it unlocks something in our mind where we're like, oh, that's awesome, that's a new information, I had considered that way, or it comes in direct confrontation and conflict with your own belief. And that's where we can show signs of rigidity with our
Mm.
thinking. We tend to think of our understanding of life as something as fairly binary. For example, when we find ourselves in a conversation that turns into a conflict, whether it's with a loved one or someone we're close to, let's say like a best friend, you have an argument. Sometimes it turns into this like verbal boxing match of trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. But that's a very binary way to look at it. When we consider perspective and understanding that is just about the glasses that we use on a specific piece of information, we understand that there's no actually such a thing as being right or wrong. It's understanding that different truths can exist under the same space. So if we take the example of a movie, when a movie comes out, we have millions of people, let's say, watching the same movie. If you ask all these people, what is your understanding of the movie, they'll all have a different
Mm.
interpretation. And that movie exists, it's the same movie for everybody, and it exists in
Mm.
the real, but every person's different interpretation, they will all be correct at the same time. There's not going to be one person who's wrong or who's right.
Mm.
And that illustrates and helps us appreciate that under this example of the movie, we can have different truths and different understandings.
Mm.
And that makes it seem as no longer rigid, no longer binary. We can have all these coexisting truths and realities. And so instead of trying to seek one specific understanding, it's important to appreciate and allow ourselves to understand that there can be coexisting truths. And I think that that's a dramatic change, in the sense that although it may seem confusing and overwhelming to think that there can be different coexisting truths, that's actually what creates creativity and diversity in our world, is being able to have these different representations of understanding of life be able to sit under the same roof, as opposed to just having one or another.
Yes, lovely. So, Oceane, this brings me to empathy. As you said, some people they can be very rigid. Not to blame anybody, but they get very fixated with their perspective, and they start believing that this particular perspective is right, and other people might not have it down correctly. And whereas there are other people who are much more open to the perspectives of others, and they even encourage different perspectives, and I see that as growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? There are lots of elements here. How would you say, what's the relationship of empathy with perspective?
It's a very good question. And I think empathy in that space can be hugely powerful, because it's when we're connecting with other people through emotions, through, or just being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And that in itself is a pretty clear practice of being able to use different perspectives. I think empathy, that simple thing of being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, it means I'm able to look at something from your perspective. And that may not be a practice of changing my own perspective, but at least it's being able to have that flexibility of mind, and be able to look at something from a different lens. And I think I find that something that's very courageous and very, even for some people, it may come out something natural, but I also find it very courageous, because again, it's allowing yourself to come out of your own understanding of things. And it's also where we have those different, this richness of diversity of all of us on this planet having different points of views, being able to access somebody else's point of view through empathy, I think is incredibly enriching and enlightening. And something that is important to consider in terms of this rigidity versus flexibility is that at the end of the day, it boils down to a sense of control over our lives. So when we have, in our day-to-day life, we think that our happiness is dependent on our life circumstances, but that our happiness is more dependent on our sense of control over those circumstances. And so when we feel like we're stuck and we're frustrated, things aren't going the way that we want, is because we're having a fixed perspective on something that is happening, and we're trying to control things that are external to us. But a solution that we have is using perspective as an internal tool to shift our thinking and see a challenge from a different angle. And that is the same for interactions with other people, and the use of empathy is being comfortable with not always having control over something, and understanding that the sense of control comes more from our way of viewing something as opposed to something happening to us. And I think another key part that empathy plays in all of this is the connection that it creates between people. I think connection and the sense of belonging is something that we all look for in our lives. And having an empathy be connector between two people, because they're able to communicate, even if they have different perspectives, they're able to communicate and reach and communicate through this bridge that is open. Both parties are open to information from the other person. That creates a connector, and also a bond that tends to be unspoken, but that is a huge a benefit to people coming together and feeling, and also contributes to the sense of control that we might have over our lives.
Yes, so the way I see it, it's something, this ability to be able to shift our perspective can come in really handy when working in teams as well. Because as we said, the rigidity, it can make us very single focus, sort of like a tunnel vision, and we're not thinking outside the box. And when we're working as a team, as they say, two heads are better than one, and we can be much more innovative and creative. Putting perspective at work within teams, how do you think it pans out?
So the biggest impact is in creativity, and diversity, but there's also in terms of communication and relationship management, is that being able to have a flexible perspective, and being able to openly share perspectives not only means that you're getting different point of views, which means an even better and bigger understanding of a particular situation. It's also key for communication. When you have different people working together, people from different backgrounds, and increasingly, and we're in a very cosmopolitan world and very international world, there's constantly lots of people from different backgrounds coming together, working together, and every person has a different way of looking at a particular piece of information, especially if we're talking about people who are from different countries, different cultural backgrounds. That's even a bigger challenge to face. But
Perspectives are influenced by things like culture, and what other things are they influenced by?
So when the different branches, I'd say, there's how we grow up, there's our family environment when we grow up, there's our social environment when we grow up, and then when we come into adulthood, there's if we're moving countries, for example, adapting to a new place, you have your cultural background, but then you adapt to a new place, and then that place and that culture becomes part of you, so then there's two cultures living inside of you, and so we're constantly being confronted to changing variations in ourselves as well, which also means that not only is it important to have flexible perspective with other people, but with ourselves as well, because we're ever changing as well. And so, yeah, the influence of perspective is both things that have made us who we are, but there's also just the functioning of our brain. There's just the fact that our brain has to focus on a certain amount of information because it can't handle everything. And it's not to say our brain is limiting, not at all, is because otherwise we would be saturated. It's just knowing that there's this factor that happens in our brain just allows us to understand that we have stuff to lose if we don't decide to have a flexible perspective, or if we don't work towards a flexible perspective. There's this notion that we could be missing out on some information as well. So it's not just to say, look, you have to change your perspective because what you're doing is not working. It's more so, no, otherwise you could be missing out on valuable information that could be helpful and beneficial for you, whether on an individual or a collective.
So what I'm hearing as well is that experience and exposure open up our minds to different perspectives as well. Because obviously the more experiences we have, and the more things we are exposed to, that tells us how different perspectives can be positive inputs. So that's a beautiful thing, actually, to add. And when it comes to how would you say about perspectives, the power of perspective? There's a saying that there's one perspective when you're in a dark place, that you have been buried, and then there's another that you could have been planted. So there's one way some people see being in a dark place or in a difficult time, see a challenge as something that's inflicted upon them, or it's a
Mhm.
test, or it's something not good. And other people search for the positives and take it as an opportunity.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing it as positive and negative perspectives. So is
Mhm.
there a way that we can shift them from being more positive, if they are negative, to more positive perspectives?
Yeah. Um, so I think the ultimate positive versus negative approach that I kind of take with perspective is that, so there's, in terms of thoughts, there's a way that we can be more positive, but is also this sense of um the way we understand something is not everything that exists for that same something. So it's like saying the map is not the territory. The understanding we have of something is not the territory. And when you're saying, when you're faced with a challenge, it feels like something is inflicted onto us, that causes in us a knee-jerk reaction where we feel attacked.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that sends us a lot into a very negative space, because we feel
Hmm.
like we don't have control. And when we feel we don't have control, it's hard to brainstorm around something, or face something in a way that's productive, because we're seeking control of this thing that's external to us, when in fact we should be seeking control over what's going on inside our minds. And that includes choosing between positive and negative thoughts. Um, Now, of course, it's the kind of thing that's easier said than done, but that is
Yes.
where the power of perspective is important, is because
Yeah.
that choice is ours. A lot of the times we feel like we're being inflicted things from outside, and it can feel like that a lot of the time, but that infliction is actually more about the way we're seeing that challenge as opposed to what's actually happening to us. So that's why it becomes crucial. So to address or understand how perspective works, and what choice we have in the negative versus positive thoughts, and humbling ourselves in a way that it's not incriminating ourselves that our brain is not able to do the right work. It's just, that's how it works, and we can find the tools we need to shift that default mode. And it kind of boils down at the end of the day to saying, is your mind in control of you, or are you in control of your mind? And it's subtle, but there is a big difference there, because when we're in control of our mind, I mean, we're choosing the direction we can go into. And that includes choosing positive thoughts over negative thoughts. And that's a whole different topic, but it's still something we have a choice over. And it can be a challenge to rewire thoughts, and that's okay. But the point is to know that we have the ability to rewire and reframe for our own benefit.
Yes. So thank you so much, Oceane. So my key takeaways today are that basically it's a lot to do with control as well. When we're trying to control other people's perspective, we're more in the rigid zone, and we're not able to respect and see the beauty of different
Mhm.
perspectives, as opposed to um, realizing that we only control ourselves and our own thoughts, and our perspective is different, and being able to forgive ourselves when we can't see things in a different way. Because
Absolutely.
as you just said that we're hard on ourselves
Mhm.
for not being able to see things in a different way, or for coming up with the solutions. We don't need to have all the
Mhm.
answers.
Absolutely.
They can always we can always, this is where we need to get a coach maybe, or
Mhm.
get somebody else,
Mhm.
maybe a friend or anybody else, because an other person will always come with a different reality, with a different background and experiences, and they'll bring in a perspective which could add something positive to your own perspective. So
Absolutely.
open-mindedness,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, respecting other people's perspectives and their views, and respecting our own. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Thank
this
you very much.
lovely conversation. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We know that a lot of you watch it at your own time and not the live session. So please feel free to still leave your questions and we'll get back to you. Thank you and have a
Thank you very
lovely
much.
weekend. Bye.